So I'm going to introduce myself. Welcome to Blues Alley Jazz. My name is Harry Schnipper. I'm the owner and proprietor of this iconic institution. This year, 2025, we are celebrating Blues Alley's 60th anniversary as America's oldest continuously operating jazz summit. And we've invited the public to attend and to participate here on Sunday, March 9th. And we would like to begin by offering up a couple of questions. Obviously, if you've ever attended one of these events here at Blues Alley, some of these questions are self-explanatory, but since we're recording this for posterity, in the hopes that we will ultimately integrate this interview into what will become a documentary, we would like to have you indulge us for the next 30 minutes as we begin to explain not only our history with the Yellowjackets, but more importantly, how we've survived so many difficulties over the course of the past 6 decades that we'd like to now record it. I've already introduced myself, and I'd like to introduce the 2 colleagues here. To my far right is Mr. Bob Mintzer, multi-instrumentalist and lead player for the Yellowjackets since 1990. And of course, the founder and creator of the Yellowjackets, Mr. Russ Ferrant. So I go back significantly. I personally have been coming to Blues Alley since 1973, before all of you were born. But I first walked through the doors to see Larry Coryell at 11th House, which, if you're familiar with that band, was a great fusion band. And Larry and I collaborated on a great many shows and events over the course of many years prior to his untimely death. And my subsequent shows that I've seen here range from everything from Dizzy Gillespie to Dexter Gordon and Miles Davis and Tower of Power and Average White Band, and the list goes on forever. It's 6 decades of what is probably the most prominent jazz music in, well, I was going to say North America, but also the world. So without further ado, I'd like to say that I first discovered the Yellowjackets in 1980. I first saw them when Blues Alley produced them in a concert at the Warner Theater in 1986. And they were paired with guitarist Larry Carlton. And it was certainly a watershed year and a very timely period of fusion music. The 1980s were a great period, and it was also a great period for the Yellowjackets because the Yellowjackets have garnered 45 years in existence, and they have received 17 nominations and 2 awards from the Grammy Foundation. So that's pretty significant in terms of staying power. Tell the audience, Russ, how you came about founding the Yellowjackets and why fusion?
Okay. Well, I'm actually not the founder, but I'm one of the. I was in the original band, and the first group was actually started by guitarist Robin Ford, and I have a history with Robin. We both grew up in the San Francisco Bay Area, and in 1973 I joined Robin's band, and we were backing Jimmy Witherspoon, and we toured. We did a tour of Europe, and then we played around the States. I did that for a couple of years. Robin subsequently left. He moved to Los Angeles. And when he was putting a band together to do his first solo recording, we had been in touch, and I moved from San Francisco down to Los Angeles. And I was introduced to the original members of Yellowjackets at that point. That was drummer named Ricky Lawson and bassist Jim Haslett. And we did one record with Robin. It was called The Inside Story. And then Robin was going to do more vocal and a little more commercial kind of recording, and we essentially formed a band within a band, and that was Yellowjackets. I remember we played at this big music association gathering convention, the NAMM show. I don't know if any of you are familiar with that, National Association of Music Merchants. And we opened for the band Toto. They were kind of new at the time. And it's the first time we were actually listed as Yellowjackets.
And what year was that?
That was, I think, like 79 or 80, right in there. And anyway, a lot of people say that, that was kind of our coming out party. The concert went really well. The Toto guys were kind of a little on their heels because Robin was such a dynamic performer. So anyway, that was kind of the launch of the band, and I've remained in the band, since that point. But a defining characteristic of the group, there is no leader. It's really a cooperative endeavor, and I think that's like the main, or certainly a really essential part of our identity, that each guy contributes equally and has an equal say in the music and the business aspects. So, yeah.
Well, that's a good answer. I mentioned 1986 because, I looked at some of the catalog of music that I own, and of course, Four Corners came out, I think, in 1986. I'd like to take you down a little bit around memory lane right now, because I've got this photograph that was signed by the Yellowjackets, and I'm trying to place, I believe that's Will Kennedy on the left.
That's right.
And that's Jimmy Hayslip, the bassist. Yeah. And who's that? Handsome devil in the middle.
I have no idea who that is.
You look like you're 13 years old. I'm guessing that's Mark Russo
on the right.
Right, okay. Yeah. So, what year would you place
that? That was, let's see. We did, this was taken at a Frank Lloyd Wright home in Hollywood. We did a video of a song from Four Corners called Wildlife, and we all had the thin ties and the kind of like Men in Black wear. So that was 86 or 87. Yeah.
Yeah, I'm going to say this because I have a pretty encyclopedic knowledge of music, and one of the curious things that I've discussed with these two gentlemen is the fact that I came from a rather peculiar household. I had parents that were into big band music, and I was growing up in a time of fusion, and so when I started listening to the Yellowjackets and I started listening to Bob, I was curious, and I want to ask you, Bob, how did you arrive at the Yellowjackets in 1990? Because that seemed to be what I consider to be almost a dynamic unto itself. And, you've cut your teeth with the Buddy Rich Band and with the Vanguard Orchestra, the Mel Lewis,
Jones
Mel Lewis Orchestra, if you're all familiar with that. Tell you, how did you guys meet and how did you collaborate, and just exactly what was the evolution of your relationship because, by the way, 1990 was 35 years ago, so that was half a lifetime ago for us. Please.
Yeah, I was a freelance musician at that time. I had my own big band in the New York City area. I had played with numerous bands. I had done a lot of studio work. And we all traveled kind of in the same circles. And as it were, I met the Yellowjackets on two different occasions that possibly could have planted some sort of seed. The first one was at Greeley, Colorado. There was a festival there, a big band festival, and I was the guest artist with the University Big Band, and the Yellowjackets played. And I remember meeting all of them at the airport, and we chatted a little bit, so got to know them. They got to know me perhaps a little bit. But then, more importantly, I was working with Michael Franks, and we did a concert in Aruba. And the Yellowjackets were supposed to either play before or after us, I don't remember, and their equipment never showed up. So they were just kind of hanging around while we were playing. And as it turned out, Steve Kahn, who was playing guitar with Michael, was good friends with Jimmy and knew the band. So I think, maybe the seed sprouted a little bit at that point. So, and then, as I understand it, Mark Russo was kind of veering in another direction and then let the band know he was going to be leaving. So they were looking for a saxophone player, and I suppose I was one of several people considered. And they invited me to come out to Los Angeles and make a record that became the project called Greenhouse. And it was just a great experience. And I thought this could be something to pursue, although I wasn't sure because we had a 1-year-old child and I wasn't keen on going on the road, and I was working quite a bit in New York and doing a lot of other things. But little by little, it kept going, and I stuck around, and it got more and more comfortable and interesting, and it's just hard to believe it's 35 years later, and that's how it happened.
It's curious because you are both prolific writers and arrangers, but also producers. And so how, the metamorphosis of this obviously is, like, for instance, Tommy LaPuma. I mean, one of the great producers of all time. Who were some of your influences? And I'm going to ask the same question of Bob as well, in terms of, obviously, you got to start with Robin and with Jimmy Witherspoon at a young age, and you were producers. You know just exactly what doors were opening and how those doors would inevitably lead to other opportunities, as we all kind of know at this point. Tell the audience and today just exactly your evolution, not only as the Yellowjackets group, but also you as an artist and musician as well.
How much time do we have? So the brief answer is, I got interested in jazz sort of like midway through high school. I had taken classical lessons as a youngster. My dad was the choir director at church. My mom played violin. They were musical and encouraged my sister and I to learn an instrument. But it was only, encountering jazz that I got really interested. And the first recording, there was a drummer in my high school named Ray Fink, and he at a high school assembly he played solo drums, and I was just transfixed. And after his performance, I talked to him, and he invited me to his house to jam. And so the first tunes I learned, I think it was Les McCann and Eddie Harris, Compared to What. And then he also had John Coltrane, My Favorite Things. He had some, the Miles Davis quintet with George Coleman, like that era. And I had no idea, especially what that music was, but I was completely mesmerized by it. I mean, it's not really explainable in any logical way, but except the things that you all might be sort of attracted to without even understanding it. And I was really bitten by the jazz bug at that time.
And then you were early on into the studio as well.
Well,
so that kind of probably
later, yeah. It was like growing up in the Bay Area, there was no music business. I mean, the only gigging opportunities were playing in lounges and nightclubs. And after doing that a little bit, I remember telling a friend, if I'm doing this, when I'm 25 years old, I'm out of here. You would come home every night and your clothes would just smell like smoke, and it was difficult. But moving to Los Angeles, I saw that there were musicians who owned homes, who had families. It was like a viable career. And then through Tommy LaPuma, actually got the opportunity to start playing on some other people's recordings. And but it was only in relocating there where there was a music industry.
Well, Lapuma obviously left a broad brush or a big footprint in the industry overall. And that's juxtaposed to what Bob was doing on the East Coast at that time. And I'm curious, you started off, I want to say, did you end up in Manhattan School? You were in Manhattan, right?
But
So tell us a little bit about that time and the current of music that was flowing through New York.
I can encapsulate my early days as music chose me. I did not choose it. So I just had this profound fascination with music. I spent hours at a piano growing up, listening to music on the television, on the radio, trying to play it on the piano. Taught myself how to play guitar, played clarinet, eventually saxophone. Any instrument I could find, I wanted to learn how to play. It was just so interesting. And my senior year of high school was a real turning point. I got to go to the Interlochen Arts Academy in Traverse City, Michigan. And I saw firsthand what sort of dedication would be involved to become a consummate musician, because everybody around me was practicing 5 hours a day and, were very, very serious about what they were doing. So, then I went to a music conservatory for 4 years, first Hart College up in Hartford, Connecticut. Jackie McLean was there.
Right.
I was a clarinet student. I played clarinet in the orchestra, chamber music. And then Jackie actually said, you got to go to New York, which was very bold for a professor to, tell somebody to leave the school they're teaching at. And I did, and I transferred to Manhattan School of Music, went there for a year and a half, and then just got enmeshed in the scene in New York. And I did everything. I played in Broadway show pits. I subbed on the New York Philharmonic, played on punk rock records. I did a record with Tiny Tim. The songs were called Yum Yum Pizza and Oh Those Landlords.
Oh, those landlords is pretty timeless.
Yeah, right. Anyway, so I did studio work. I just wanted to do anything and everything. I loved playing. And right out of school, I got a gig with Tito Puente and this orchestra. We played every night of the week. We made $25 a night, and they took taxes out. And I somehow managed to pay my rent. And then Buddy Rich put a big band together in New York, and that paid 3 times more than Tito. And we were like, we're going to succeed. So actually, the guy sitting next to me and I moved over to Buddy's band, and I spent 2.5 years there. While there, I traveled the world, played every night. These opportunities don't exist quite that way today. And I started writing arrangements, which I had never studied. I knew nothing about, but just kind of got thrown into the fire. And I really enjoyed that a lot. And from there, when I left Buddy in 77, I played for a time with the Thad Jones Mel Lewis Big Band, played with Louis Bellson, subbed on Gil Evans' band, was doing stuff around New York. And then what happened next? Just a lot of different things, playing with a lot of different musicians, Broadway shows kind of throughout because it was steady work, it was a steady paycheck. I have a pension today, and you could make a good living as a musician, and a lot of people don't really know that. In fact, when we moved out of Brooklyn up to the suburbs, our neighbors sort of came around snooping to see, like, what is this guy about? He's a musician, what does he do? And, so what do you do? How could, in the back of their mind, it's like, what are you doing in this neighborhood? But between all the work and teaching was an integral part, I think, of both of our experience. You sew together a rather nice living, and doing something you love, right? So, and then I played with Jaco Pastorius for a couple of years, played with Mike Beneri, Randy Brecker, subbed on the New York Phil, American Ballet Theater, a lot of freelance work around New York, started my own big band around 83, and onward. And then 90 met the Yellowjackets, and
all went downhill.
No, went uphill. The band might have
No.
The band might have gone down. In fact, when I joined the Yellowjackets, I think, wouldn't you say, the band was at the height of its popularity in a certain way, or maybe not the height, but it was up there. We were playing large venues, and people wanted the hits.
Yeah.
kind of.
Yeah.
And it was, I guess, more of what you would think a fusion band might be. At least it felt that way to me. And I thought, there goes the neighborhood. This jazzer is in the band now. It's like, but the music was heading in that direction anyway. And I think that the critical thing to know is with a band like this where there's no leader, each corner, or each of the four corners, excuse the pun, has a major influence on the direction of the music. And in my case, I sort of came from more of the traditional jazz world and wrote accordingly, played accordingly, and kind of steered the music a little bit in that direction, and also facilitated somebody like Russ writing in such a way where, him knowing how I play would allow him to write a certain kind of way. And so the music took on kind of a direction and life of its own.
Although you did not hang up your big band shoes.
I never hang up anything. I'm like a worker bee. I'm like doing a lot of different things all the time.
But you touched on a very important point. For those of you in the audience who are unaware of this, this is not only the 60th anniversary of Blues Alley, it's also the 30th anniversary of the Blues Alley, nonprofit Blues Alley Jazz Society, which I founded, and which has now boasted graduating students from every major music school and conservatory. And I have relied upon these two because I'm happy to announce that we finally arrived at what I call the nexus of education and performance programming. And that's very important. It's very critical because when I was growing up, there were no major conservatories and music schools. It was an evolution that began in the 1960s as they began to codify and create pedagogies around jazz music. And David Baker's the first person that comes to mind because I worked with David for so many years. And he was a polyglot. I mean, he was so not only interested in education, and I guess I'm thinking of the Lenox School and all of that emerged from there in the 1960s. But by the 1970s, jazz departments were beginning to be established for the first time in the history of jazz music. Why do I explain that? Because these two gentlemen are both distinguished faculty at the University of Southern California's Thornton School of Music. And I'm going to fast forward just a little bit because I have sent students to Thornton School through our program, and I've worked with Bob on educational programming as well. But I recall distinctly sitting in that corner with the vice president of Berklee College of Music, and you guys were performing on stage. And in 2008, you made the move to go to California, which must have been, I assume that it may have been coercion or persuasion from Russ and his, no? You were independently
not at all.
approached? Okay.
Yeah. It was the swimming pool and movie stars.
Oh, I see. Yeah, thank you, Beverly Hills.
No, it was just a compelling opportunity to teach in a more profound capacity. Whereas I was at Manhattan School of Music before we moved west for 20 some odd years, and I was an adjunct teacher. I wasn't there that much, but this was a full-time position being offered. But the caveat was I would be able to continue my performing and traveling, because they kind of encourage that kind of thing, because really, if you think about it, it's a nice recruiting tool if somebody of prominence is out there, talking up the program. And, in fact, I recruited a fellow named Tom Farris from your program who wound up going to our school. So,
which is interesting because that was the vision that I created 30 years ago. And I can honestly say that it's come to fruition. Today's Sunday, 2 nights ago, Nick Payton was on the stage, and his bassist was an alumnus of my Blues Alley University. So I'm going to ask you, having been in education as long as you have, do you see the self-perpetuation and the evolution of your students now in performance and specifically pursuing careers in the industry?
Yeah. Well, I retired 2 years ago, but I taught from '99 until then, and the students, I mean, well, they run the gamut. So, but the gifted students are like off the charts. I mean, I don't have anything or much, or I feel like, what am I going to teach you? They're really so accomplished, and they introduce us, and I was introduced to another generation of music makers, the people that they're listening to and interested in, and the kind of writing that goes on. It's like there's certainly a development and an evolution in jazz. I mean, there always is, and now is no exception. There's super talented young musicians.
And they have more tools at disposal.
Well, they do, there's a plus and a minus side to that, like before the internet and all that. If you wanted to learn something from a record, you had to put it on and keep bringing the needle back and forth till you learned that phrase you were interested in. Now you can pull it up, slow it down to half speed, and But yeah, I mean, all the information is out there, and yeah, I'm blown away by the young musicians.
I am today.
Yeah,
too.
yeah.
I think that quality of music talent in Washington D.C. is the best I've heard in 50 years.
That's great to hear.
So,
yeah.
and also because of the internet, people don't have to move physically in the universe as much as they used to have to. I'm talking about recordings, but growing up and watching Doc Severinsen's band with Johnny Carson and the quality of musicianship that crossed that stage, and how they were able to secure a regular income. I always thought, those are the left coast guys, and then over here on the right coast, you've got enough business in New York and major music cities to be able to proliferate and to secure an income that would otherwise allow you to achieve middle class success, And I think that's really the ultimate outcome. I think someone once said to me that jazz occupies 0.1111% of the listening audience in the world. And so it's something that we have to constantly reinforce and reiterate and revisit and educate new audiences. And I think one of the big examples of that was the rise of the hip hop and music industry of the 90s in Los Angeles as they began sampling some of this great music.
Yeah.
When there would be, as you said, Eddie Henderson and Les McCann. Les McCann was on the stage for many times here. And, I've worked with all of these artists. I personally perceive the future is very positive. I know that there might be some pundits in the audience who might otherwise think arts and culture in Washington, D.C. is in a tenuous position right now. But I'd like to ask both of them, you're out there outside the bubble. You are touring, and I know that you've got dates both here domestically as well as abroad coming up this year. Obviously, we're out of the pandemic. What do you think the future of jazz music in general and the ecosystem, if you will call the industry? What do you think the future of jazz is today, Bob?
I think it looks bright. I mean, from our viewpoint, anyway. I mean, we're busier than ever. Last year and this year, we're playing to full houses pretty much everywhere, and the internet has really helped to expose people to the music all over the world. I conduct a radio band in Cologne, Germany, and that band, it's kind of a state-funded band, so to speak, and it primarily performs in the Westphalia or northwestern part of Germany because that's kind of what they're contracted to do, so they don't travel very much. However, they have a huge presence on Facebook and YouTube, so people all over the world love this band. I mean, they have hundreds of thousands of followers. And I booked a tour for the band in Chicago, New York, and Pittsburgh just last week, and people went crazy. They were waiting for us. because it was sort of a rarity. So between social media, the internet, and the performances, from my perspective, things look bright, if you have compelling music, something interesting from the heart, people are going to come, if you just keep working at it. That's been my
For clarity purposes, Mr. Minzer is describing the WDR big band out of Cologne, Germany. And I hasten to point out other major European countries have state-run big bands also, like the Boston Big Band out of Stockholm. And
Boozland, you mean?
Boozland, yeah.
That's Gothenburg.
That's Gothenburg, okay. But at the same time,
Stockholm Jazz Orchestra, Stockholm.
Yeah, I mean, there's so
Danish
many.
Radio Big Band, Copenhagen. There's a Ljubljana. There's a big band in Slovenia.
I'm fascinated by the fact that despite the advances in certain music genres, I'm going back 50 years, in rock and roll, the evolution of punk, hip hop, rap, all these genres of music, they have their own evolution. But jazz and big band specifically, I'm just amazed by how this younger generation is attracted to it, and how, having graduated these students, I'm often curious how they even come to jazz. So, I'll ask their parents, and their parents will laugh. We have no idea, but I think that there is a certain sense of stability in that genre. And I guess when it comes to big bands, and I'm seeing this personally, you circulate with a certain quality of musicianship and talent, and then you continue to look for, and Maynard would pick kids out of school, and so many, Dizzy, and so many others, Now we have an incubator and multiple incubators, not only throughout the United States, but throughout the world. I'm going to posit the same question to Mr. Ferrand. What and how do you see the future of jazz from your point of view?
Well, I mean, echoing what Bob said, just personally, through our little lens, it's as robust as it's been. Some sort of larger trends, which maybe, might be somewhat problematic, like when we first started playing European jazz festivals, the North Sea Festival or the Montreux Jazz Festival, there were primarily jazz artists, and there weren't too many pop groups, Now it's pretty much, it's a pop festival kind of under the umbrella of, so they say, jazz, and a few jazz acts or world music. So, there's the economic pressures that weigh upon the jazz world to some degree. But what I think both Bob and I have said, and you said it too, the people that love this music, they're just drawn to it. It's not, as a musician, if you want to make money, you don't go into jazz. That's not like a winning strategy.
I beg to differ.
Okay.
And yet at the same time, what I find so fascinating is that your remark about going into jazz and seeing the evolution of the music, and we could speak to that on a great many levels in terms of the quality of musicianship out there. My job, of course, is to identify those emerging artists and to bring them to the stage, because at the end of the day, not only do we look back upon the Blues Alley legacy, but our prophecies as well. And we prophesized that certain artists and musicians would not only establish but accelerate their careers. And so we have to constantly feed this animal in a way in which it thrives and it flourishes. So with that said, I'd like to open the floor for just a moment if anybody has any questions. I've been a lecturer and a writer of jazz articles all my life, and so I realize that from production point of view. You got to put it out there. There's got to be a portal. I often used to say to people when they would criticize Kenny G, I'd say, if they get them to Charlie Parker, they would have succeeded. I happen to be one of those people who, for whatever reason, identified Charlie Parker and Dizzy Gillespie. And that was, I'll never forget, reading articles by prominent magazines at that time. That's not jazz. Or, that's a moldy figure. Remember the moldy figure of speech? I think those pundits, over the long term, lacked the credence that otherwise magnified this music in a way which became popular universally and specifically overseas. And artists today have to adopt or adapt their musicality to their audience as opposed to vice versa. And I tell you that because there are so many recordings I own that I didn't understand when I bought them. And yet at the same time, years later, I went back to that music and I said, wow. And intuitively what I'm saying is that a good recording, you'll get something out of it every single time you listen to it. And so that's why you repeatedly play it. But it's also important to be sensitive to what the new music is coming out. And by the way, it's a lot more expensive today to produce a recording than it was a decade or more ago as well. So that's the challenge, how do you get your music out there? How do you use the internet, as you will? Hey, let me ask someone in the audience, how did you come to the Yellowjackets? I mean, you just magnify out. We don't have radio anymore, guys. I don't know if you noticed that, but everything is now programmed for us in an algorithm that tells us what we want to listen to. Gentleman over there on my right.
Yeah, I followed you guys since college. Obviously, it's been 40 years. I've been following you everywhere you go, or as much as I can follow you, of course. But for me, 40 years ago, your music was so groundbreaking because it was just different. It was very edgy and a lot of syncopations going on and counterpoints and all these kind of wonderful things that made me as a drummer crazy, right? And I love that. So I have a question for you both, and Ms. Ferrante, you talked about the fact that you see some young musicians now that are so good that you wonder what you can teach them, right? And it brings to mind some of the newer, kind of younger bands that are coming out now, and I just want to get your opinion on what you think about them breaking new grounds in the way you guys did also. And obviously we have a great following today because we're all here to see you guys wherever you go. But like people like Mark Lettieri, for example, an incredible guitar player, and I mean, it's different, and it's a little bit popish, maybe sometimes, but also really edgy and really, really technical, right? So what is your opinion about these new generation of young bands that are obviously trying to make it out there too, and by playing in places like this?
Yeah, I mean, I think, they're exploring other territory. I really applaud that. There's kind of an interesting strain I find. I mean, and each of the artists is different, but some of it is maybe more intellectually influenced, like it's more cerebral, like a lot of intricacies, like shifting time signatures, unusual phrases, and maybe like this, maybe in my generation it was maybe more blues based, or that was a strong component of the music. In some groups, maybe that's not as important, or it's not playing as prominent a role. But I mean, they're virtuoso musicians and breaking new ground and sort of inspiring other people, opening up territory to explore. And that's I mean, I totally applaud that. I think
it's called taking chances.
Yeah, breaking the mold. Yeah.
Hold on, this gentleman over here, you'd like to ask a question?
Well,
Sir?
I was going to make a comment and a question. Yes, I came across you guys. I was living in LA, listening to KKGO, when you first came out. I think Robin Ford was in the band at that time with that album that had the bumblebee on the cover.
Okay,
Yeah.
first one, yeah.
But I know you guys have changed over time. Members of the band. I think I saw you here with Marcus, with the Baylors, Marcus and
Yes.
and his wife. And is Dane still with you guys?
Yep.
Okay, yeah, and Will Kennedy.
Yep.
Yeah, okay. So, but I'm just curious, how do you get your music out now with so few radio stations out there to play it?
Well, we mentioned the internet. We are with a record label, and we've been really fortunate through the band's career that we've always had recording contracts. I think we put out one record on our own that was self-financed, but otherwise we've had record companies. We're now with Mac Avenue. They do the promotion. They get the word out there, so that we feel very fortunate with that.
And there are jazz stations that play our records. If you go on the internet, go to jazzweek.com. There's a jazz chart there. And I think right now our new record is around number 12, something like that. So the record company generally enlists a radio person to see to it that your music gets to the various radio stations, as well as a PR person that sees to it that there are things in print to just alert people to the fact that there's a new project out.
Well, this is sort of a setup question because I represent jazzradiodc.com. It is an internet station, and we do play your music. And we did get the latest recording from, I think it was Manchester Craftsman Guild. Is that the label, MCG? Is that the one you're on?
The WDR Big Band did a project that's pretty way out. It's called Bluegrass. And we got these two really expert bluegrass soloists, and I arranged this bluegrass music for a jazz big band. It's something you've never heard before.
Yeah.
Well, that's good.
Might be good, might not.
Yeah.
Well, I love the music.
Americana and jazz.
Yeah.
Good bedfellows. You have another question? Do you have a question, sir?
Not more of a comment, I guess. I think the first time I saw you guys,
I think the first time I saw you guys as a group was perhaps out at the Meriwether Post Pavilion in Columbia, Maryland. And Michael Franks was playing with you guys. I think it was part of a jazz festival.
Right.
And we've been listening to your music and coming every time you're in town we see you guys. So please keep going.
Well, I would say that it's a self-fulfilling prophecy. When, I look at it, especially during the pandemic, but decades ago, when I was looking at the evolution of print advertising, I decided in 2006 to abandon that business model and put our emphasis on the online subscribers. And because we continued to broadcast and present music during the pandemic, we expanded our audience to a global audience. And so you have to come up with rather innovative methods of getting the music out there. So if you're a subscriber, obviously you guys all are, because you wouldn't have known about this meet and greet if you hadn't been a subscriber to the Blues Alley mailing. So that's important as well. I think we have to constantly be on the front lines of trying to promote this music. It's not difficult. I guess that's why we're sold out last night and tonight, because people are returning to the small intimacy of music clubs as opposed to getting all of their entertainment in large concert halls. Are there any other questions? Yep, sir.
I'll answer your question.
I'll answer your question. The Yellowjackets are my family's band. So they are, and like you, Mr. Ferranti, I've got a musical family, and they lead. They're professors of jazz history and musicianship, and classical musicians and organists, but I think it's important too for me. I've exposed my grandfather, parents, uncles, cousins. I've also exposed my children to your music, and will continue to do so. And I guarantee my grandchildren as well. And I just wanted to thank you for all that. And I've listened to you since I was a kid as well, from the Revolution album and all the way through with Marcus and of course Will. I'm a drummer, piano player as well. It's just wonderful. So thanks for everything, and we'll continue the Yellowjackets story for a long time.
Wow, thank you.
Well, that's a great way to summarize this conversation. Unless Mr. Mincer or Mr. Ferran have any additional comments, I would summarize your remarks by saying the ultimate compliment is that great music is timeless. Thank you all for coming. You're going to see a great set tonight. One more question, huh? Make it quick.
Okay, it's quick. I'm a jazz saxophonist, so I want to ask Bob, what's his favorite sax brand, mouthpiece, plastic reeds?
Okay, we can actually take that conversation. You can answer that question.
20 seconds. I play an Eastman 52nd tenor saxophone that I worked on with the company. It's a wonderful company. They make all kinds of instruments. And it was the one time I actually had a company work with me and make changes as per my suggestions. And I really like that horn a lot.
Is it going to fall prey to the tariffs?
It might.
It's
They're
from
made
China.
in China, so anything could happen. And
I don't want to get into
happen.
that social political sphere, even though we're in our nation's capital, Bob. But let's just kind of end the conversation there. Thank you all for coming. It's been a great pleasure to introduce these gentlemen to our audience and vice versa. Thank you so much.
Thank you all. Thank you.